There's several plateaus that companies experience. When you get to a plateau, you are creating a new business. I can kind of relate it back to running a little bit, where if you train to run a marathon, that's one sport. If you train to run a 50 miler or a 100 miler or a 200 miler, each one of those are different sports in the things that you have to account for. Similar to property management space, if you want to grow to 50 doors, have an okay lifestyle, you're doing everything yourself. You get to 100 doors, you still really don't have a lot of cash flow to be able to pay somebody that's going to stay with you long term and have decent income yourself.
Welcome, entrepreneurs, to Pay or Quit,
where we reveal the gritty truth behind business success.
People see the glory, but not the struggle it takes to get there.
We're here to share the real stories of entrepreneurs navigating the tough intersection of business and relationships. I'm Tony Cline.
And I'm Shawn Johnson. And together we'll guide you through the real challenges faced as serial entrepreneurs.
Join us for the untold stories behind the scenes.
Buckle in. It might get messy.
We've been talking about it for a little while. Well, let's just jump in.
It's been in the works, hasn't it? I mean, we've talked about this for quite some time. We actually have had a couple formats that we've talked through, and here we are.
So let's talk a little bit about how we initially met each other.
So I was a NARPM Southern Conference volunteer, like a room host. And I was working on my points to get my RMP, I guess, years ago. And you were the speaker that day, and you were talking about running. And
big surprise.
No, big surprise there. And I was the room host, so I had to introduce you. And that was my first time I met you. But I was so new in the industry. This was probably 10 years ago, I would guess. That I was like, dude, this guy's cool, man. Wonder what this guy's all about, you know? And how does he find time to do these ultra marathons? It was bizarre to me, and run a business, because I was like in the thick of working extreme hours, you know, like any startup owner is going through, and that's who I was at the time. To even have time to volunteer to do a NARPM event was a struggle back then. So that was my first meeting of Tony.
Yeah, I think that was obviously, if that's the first time we met, then that I can't go back any further than that. But I actually remember that. It's funny because I hadn't got into the ultra marathons yet. I was still doing marathons, and I thought it'd be super clever to do a presentation like 26.2 ways of running a business and how it's like running a marathon or something. I don't even remember the title of it now. It's probably super corny to take what I learned from running a marathon and running a business. But I remember that was good days. I can't remember what hotel that was at, but I think it was at one of the ones where either there was tape. I think it was the tape on the carpet. Remember the
Tropicana?
It was the Tropicana. Yeah. It was, they had tape running through just all along in the hallways and in the conference rooms, and I can't remember.
Not just any tape. It was the shiny gold duct tape. I mean, like the silver duct tape. It was so bad.
Yeah, they wound up tearing it down. I don't know, a year or two later, I think. But anyway, so yeah, I think that I remember that us meeting then, and then we probably didn't connect very much from that point for, I don't know, another year or two maybe. And then the next
I remember my next time. So we were at another NARPM conference, and you came up to me, and I don't remember what the topic of discussion was, but you wanted to pick my brain about something. And from that point on, I got your number, we connected, and then kind of built the relationship from there. So I think that was probably 2 years after I introduced you, is my guess. I don't know, man. I have a terrible memory, but yeah. So
I always made it a point to try to connect with as many people as possible at those events. And so the good thing is I met a lot of people. The bad thing is I can't remember who I met when and where, and if I've already talked to you in the past. But well, let's jump in and talk a little bit about why we decided to do this podcast and why we decided to do this format. And let's just kind of talk about what we hope to just bring to the conversation.
Yeah. So for me, we've gone, you and I, and we'll get to more of this, but you and I have gone through this cycle of property management and owning property management firms. And we're both not PMC operators right now, which is pretty different. It's unique. And we've been through this like mergers, acquisitions, getting acquired, and gone through that whole gamut there. And now we're in a non-compete, if you will. So, and we have our own things going, and it's allowed us the freedom and time and space to be creative and do new things. And it's really cool. So that's one thing for me. I've been super excited about and enjoying my life a lot. Number two is, and you pointed this out to me, a part of what I really enjoyed and loved about property management was actually the gateway drug, if you will, to real estate investing. I love real estate investing, and it just provided so many opportunities to be an investor with the portfolio that you have under management, and the clients already know, like, and trust you. And so that's one thing I just really enjoy and hope to get out of this, is the opportunity to spread that through the property management world. Like, if you are not investing as a property manager, you're really missing the biggest golden nugget that there is. Like, the reoccurring revenue of property management is great. The sales, when you get to sell a client's door or help them purchase one, that's great too. But the real nugget is the investing side of this. So that's what I'm hoping to gain and just really enjoy myself. So what about you, Tony?
I'm excited to be able to be on the podcast and just spend some time with my good friend Shawn and talk a little bit about what we've been through in the industry. And we've been through a lot. So let's actually go back to what that beginning looks like. Because you said we both have been in the industry, but neither one of us are operating a property management company now. That skips over a lot of our history, and our history together and our history separate before that. So why don't you kind of rehash how you got into this business, and then we'll talk a little bit about how we made it out.
Interesting. I know you're going to be upset that I mentioned this, but I was flying helicopters. That was my
It
career.
took you a while to get to it. We already talked about running in the first 2 minutes.
Yeah. So, went to college, and then out of college, I went to flight school, started flying, and I set this goal. I remember this goal that I had for myself, and I was 22 years old. I purchased my first house at 20, and at 22, I sold it in Phoenix, Arizona, and it made this big pop of money in 2 years' time, and I did nothing to it. And it was an anomaly, because I don't think that's typical to real estate investing, but that's what happened to me. I had this chunk of money. It helped provide some finances through flight school. But I set this goal for myself. I said, when I'm 27 years old, I want to own 3 rental investments and 3 rental properties. Well, 27 comes and goes. I'm flying helicopters, traveling a lot, and I did not achieve that goal. And that was one of the most depressing birthdays of my life, because I didn't achieve this goal. It was bizarre. But I had found, and I didn't find, but my wife and I met at a wedding, and we got married, and she was really into business, and she was a corporate paralegal at the time. And so we moved actually from San Diego to New Mexico. And this is all relates. I'll get to the point to San Diego, or from San Diego to Las Cruces, New Mexico, to purchase a full service car wash. Holy crap. That's exactly where I got my master's degree in business, because there's no other way to really learn it. Like, you could go to college and all that stuff, but man, that was a crash course. It was so hard. Managing employees is in a different demographic. Like us as property managers, you get professionals. Well, I was hiring the same folks as McDonald's was, and that's just a different beast. And so anyhow, we decided, well, we're going to have kids now. Let's move to where I grew up, get closer to grandparents. And my sister-in-law at the time said, there's a good need for property managers here, a good property management firm. My wife was doing corporate corporate paralegal work for a real estate investing firm, and she would oversee property managers on the the big apartment complexes, 300 plus unit apartment complexes across the nation. And she would oversee these folks. She's like, that sounds miserable, but let's give it a go. You know what I mean? So we started this property management firm in 2012. It scaled fast. It grew way faster. I remember having this conversation with Kristen, like, if we could just get it to 100 doors, that'll provide a great living. I can continue to fly helicopters and we'll just have a good, comfortable life. Well, that sounded boring to us within minutes, like, okay, the 100's comfortable and complacent, but let's see how far we could take this, and we scaled it up to 620, I think, or something like that at our peak, and decided to start another branch in Flagstaff, Arizona. And that was just a totally different beast. That's a different challenge. Going from Farmington and 4.5 hours away is another branch, Flagstaff, very difficult. And we could talk about that in a future episode. And then Tony and I decided to pick up the conversation in a little old town called Moab, Utah. We had side-by-side razors and decided to go tear it up out there for a weekend or something. I don't remember, like 5 days or something like that. And I dropped this line, like, wouldn't it be cool if the guys in our mastermind would form a company together, just compile our resources in the various places we are across the nation and see if we could pull a scalable company. And you had already rebranded, so you'll have to share your whole perspective. But we kept the name Homevault. That was your company name. It was great branding, great image, great reputation. And that was just a natural place to go with that. And did that for a couple of years. We'll talk about details later, but I don't want to give too much now. And go ahead, Tony.
That was one of my favorite conversations that I've ever had. For us to be just out in Moab, out in the middle of wilderness, thinking about business. It was also one of the most life-changing and impactful conversations that I've had, because for both of us, it changed the trajectory of what we were doing. We were in a mastermind with several great, smart people that were all running their own individual businesses. But one thing that we learned through this, and not to dive too deep into this now, because I know we'll talk about it in the future, but you can bring together a bunch of brilliant minds and create something that is not so brilliant in the end. So while it was a great conversation, we talked about the future and we talked about what the possibilities were. The execution and the actual delivery on what we attempted to put together turned out much differently than what I had envisioned and what I had hoped for. And so I know we want to kind of talk about the blood and guts of some of the things we've been through. So I know we'll get into that at some point. But it was a great conversation for me, because I had been running a business here in Denver, a property management company. I purchased a brokerage in 2000. So at the point we started talking, I think it was probably 2017, 2018 when we first started kicking around the idea. It had to be 2018 because I rebranded in 2017. But even though I was connected through NARPM, having this mastermind where we have this community that we could come together and really be open about some of the things we were working on and some of the things we were sharing. In the first 17 years of business, I didn't have that. I had friends that were local that had property management companies, but none that I felt as open as I did with the guys in our mastermind. And so, starting the business, or actually buying the business, I bought a real estate brokerage that just happened to do property management. They had 31 doors when I bought them, and it wasn't really even a property management company. Again, it was a sales brokerage, and they focused on downtown Denver, and I really liked that target and niche market. And so I bought the brokerage, and when I took over, they had whiteboards up on the wall with like little taped grid, and they had like the months going across the top and the names of the properties or addresses of the properties down the side. And they would, if somebody paid rent, they'd use a different color marker to check that the rent was paid. So, if you rubbed up against that, you could wipe out somebody's whole portfolio. But
I'm guessing that you guys had a notepad or something that with the actual tallies, not just a whiteboard, right?
Yeah, well, that's how they tracked who was paid. But yeah, they had the old three-way reconciliation trust. Like you open up the book and the checks with the triplicates and the whatever. You press real hard.
Carbon copies or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But which was a big shock for me because I had just sold a technology business and I was looking to do something else. Similar situation where I was in a business and then I sold it and then had a consulting contract where I had to consult to bring the employees over and on board. And then I had 8 months on that contract and then I needed to get out of the business when I left there. And so I was looking at what else I would want to do. And the only other thing I had ever done as a professional, aside from, in high school and college, worked at a jewelry store selling jewelry and, getting my cutting my teeth on sales in those types of situations. But the only other thing I had ever done is right out of college, I got licensed as a real estate broker. I sold 2 homes in about the first 6 months. One of them was to my mother. I think she just felt bad. So she decided she agreed to move for me. But the only other thing I had done besides having that tech company was real estate. So flash forward years later, and in 2000, I buy this company. And bringing my tech background into a real estate company in 2000, back then, you had agents that had an AOL email address and they checked our email maybe once a week. And so we really grew fast. You used to be able to, there was software that you could plug in your domain and your keywords, and it would list where you ranked in like 200 search engines. Which who knew that there were that many back then? But there were just hundreds of places where you could track your domain and your ranking and all of that. And so I got really good at that. And we scaled and grew really quickly after doing that. And I actually wound up creating our own software from my technical background. There wasn't anything at that point. Appfolio didn't exist, or I didn't know about it. I didn't join Propertyware until like 2011. So there was this gap of time where I took my expertise in the technology side and we just wrote a software called Cockpit where you could run the business from inside the cockpit. Thought you might like that. It's kind of a flying reference. But,
that's nice.
Yeah. So I got in the business.
Wait, what year did you sell the data management company and then get into owning or purchasing the brokerage?
Yeah. So I sold in 99 and then in 2000, I bought the property management company. So it was
I graduated high school that year. So
yeah. Well,
That's
awesome. It was a good year for me. I don't know about you, but it was
yeah, it was a great year. Yeah. Okay, cool. That makes sense. So you buy this, you sell the data management, you buy the brokerage in 2000, and then when did you kind of have that parallel shift from like, okay, we got a brokerage. I know you scaled the brokerage really well. You had a lot of agents, but you also scaled the property management company. Like, when was the light bulb moment of like, property management has reoccurring revenue, or there's something occurred there to think, okay, there's something here more than 31 doors?
Yeah, it took me probably 2 to 3 years before I started to make that shift. And in the early days, in the early 2000s, in the downtown Denver market, or in the Denver market in general, it was a great market. You could buy a property and then, based on the financing, 6 months to a year, cash out and use some of that money you cashed out as a down payment on a new one, because they were appreciating that fast, and lending rules were a little bit loose. And so we had people that would buy a property and then we'd manage it, and then we'd find another great opportunity and we would buy that one. And so it was a great time for us early on the sales side. So we grew really fast on sales and building the brokerage. But in doing so, we kept adding more and more properties to our portfolio. And at one point, you and maybe it just took me longer than most, but at one point, I saw the recurring revenue that you could get in property management without having that feast or famine, where you have sales brokerage where, yeah, you get a big check, but then where's the next one? And you're always hunting. And we always did a pretty good job of having those stacked, a few a month or back to back, month to month. But it was always work. I was working like crazy. I was taking my laptop to bed. I was typing contracts at night. It was just stuff that you do when you're trying to build a business. But at some point, I'm like, I don't want to be in that world anymore. And I like the stacking those nickels of the property management business, because even though it's not as big and flashy, it's recurring, and I can actually work less and figure out how to put some systems in place and have people run this business for me. And with my technology background that was in document, data, and workflow management, it became really easy for us to implement some of that stuff.
Yeah, I always love the thought of like, how do I don't want to do a business that I can't put on some bit of an overdrive, or it becomes semi-passive at least. I never viewed that as a brokerage. Like a brokerage, I've got to be the guy to bring in the bacon, you know what I mean? Yep. And work the leads.
You're unemployed. You're unemployed every 30 days. At the start of the month, you're unemployed till you close that next deal.
Yeah, that was never appealing to me. Actually, it's scary to me. But yeah. Okay, cool. That's really cool. And so fast forward, then you rebrand to Homevault 2017, you said, or maybe you said 8, maybe it was, but yeah, talk about that.
Yeah, it was 2017. So we wound up for the first 11 years or so, I didn't know that there was anything like NARPM or any group trade association. So I didn't really know any of the other people in my market. We had a company called Cliff Dwellers Real Estate, and we were in the downtown Denver. So the logo and the branding and everything we did, we were hyper focused on downtown high-rise lofts and condos. And it was great branding. It kind of built a wall around the marketplace that kind of kept other people out. But at the same time, when you build a wall around something, it kind of keeps you in too. And we had more and more of our investors wanting to go out into the suburbs and buy single family homes. And so at that point, we really started looking at what, if we're going to rebrand, what could we rebrand that would apply to any market anywhere, which maybe most people start with a brand like that. But, we didn't. We were hyper focused. We would tell people if it's too far to walk, it's too far. But if I could walk to it from my office, why would you pick anybody else? And so we had to break out of that model, both from a consumer standpoint, but also from a realtor referral standpoint. People wouldn't refer us properties that were right across the highway, less than a half a mile, because we had trained them that all we did was downtown. So we had to get out of that, and we rebranded, and we spent a lot of time on that brand, for coming up with the brand name, to coming up with the logo, to just what the brand meant. And honestly, I still miss that brand. I think it was a great brand. The logo with the home inside the vault, the home was green like a Monopoly house. The vault was gray, strong. And that's why I fought so hard when we had our merger to keep that. And so we can talk a little bit about, what it looked like when we brought our brands together, and what we did when we did our merger, and how we rebranded every location across the country. But
believe me, I was not going to fight for Independence Capital. It's such a long mouthful. And it's hard to
email address.
Yeah, I was going to say the email address and the URL are just, that's a lot of typing,
Yeah.
But no, that's really cool. Yeah. So let's save the kind of the nitty gritty of Homevault and Pure, or acquisition, for a later episode. I think we could dive deeper into that. That'll be really cool. What are you working on now, Tony?
Well, so you and I have both been in this business for a long time. We've gone through buying property management companies. We've merged property management companies. We have sold property management companies. So we've been through the whole game. Anything you can do with a property management company, we've done at this point. And after we had our exit and kind of stepped away and started looking at what we were going to do, one of the things that I've always done in some capacity is to be a coach or consultant. If you go back to my original days of being a consultant with the technology company, we were dealing with Fortune 100 companies. We were dealing with high military clearance or high clearance military installations. So I've always had a knack for finding not just the 98% that works and training on that and working with that, but finding the 2% that doesn't and trying to eliminate that. And so I've taken that skill set and combined that with my 20 plus years in property management, full-time coaching and consulting in the property management space. And, through Homevault, when we had Homevault and Homevault Academy, I was doing that back then, but just having our own philosophy. This is something we'll touch on in the future, but when you bring together the number of people that we had in the leadership of the company that we formed when we merged, you get different personalities. And you and I had a very similar philosophy on business, how to treat people, how clients should be treated, how to run a business, whether it's high touch or high volume or whatever. So I've actually taken that model, rolled it out, and am doing that similar business improvement with other property management companies across the country. And I really, really enjoy it. It's a passion of mine to watch people start where they are, create a big vision, create a big dream, and then through the ultra running, which I haven't gotten to talk about enough in this, but through the ultra running, you learn how to accomplish big things that take a long time to execute. And I've brought some of those skill sets to the business that I'm running as well.
Yeah.
What are you up to, Shawn?
Well, before you get to that, I kind of want to pick your brain a little bit. So like in your consulting now, what kind of clients that you work with? Are these like complete new startups? I've never done property management, or I've got 50 doors, but now I'm at a point I got to hire my first person. I've got to figure out how to do processes. Like what's your real niches in that, and what, kind of services you provide through your consultant?
Sure. Most of the companies that I have been around for a little while. So most of the clients that I'm working with have been in the business. You had mentioned earlier when you and Kristen had got to a certain point, you got up to 100 doors, and then you decided that wasn't that exciting and you wanted to do something else. There's several plateaus that companies experience. And when you get to a plateau, you are creating a new business. I can kind of relate it back to running a little bit, where if you train to run a marathon, that's one sport. If you train to run a 50 miler or a 100 miler or a 200 miler, each one of those are, even though it's essentially the same thing, you're just running, but they're different sports in the things that you have to account for. And it's similar to property management space. If you want to grow to 50 doors and have an okay lifestyle, you're doing everything yourself. You get to 100 doors, maybe you can bring on somebody to help you, but you still really don't have a lot of cash flow to be able to pay somebody that's going to stay with you long term and have decent income yourself. And so, there are different plateaus. So I have one person that's just getting on board. We're working with them right now where they're laying out everything from scratch, which is a great idea to start there. But most of the clients that I'm working with already have anywhere from 200. I think the biggest client I have right now is about 1,700 doors. So, it's a big mix, and there's different concerns and challenges at each one of these different plateaus that you reach.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and you probably can find different avenues to help any one of these. That's fantastic to see the variety there. And I'm guessing that what you can learn from one of your clients can actually be applied to others. It's like there was a very short period of my property management career that I didn't have a coach or a consultant through it. I always wanted one. I always had one because I felt like the value is just somebody's perspective outside of mine, because we get in this vacuum of life, right? We just think that this is the only way of doing things because my brain tells me that's the only way to do things. And to have somebody outside of my environment give a perspective was always super valuable to me. I always had a great coach through the years, like Todd Breen, Darren Hunters, those folks that were just just super wise in their time in the property management world, and been in a lot longer than I ever had. And so that was my, my mentorship through it was great. So
Well, one of the things that makes a lot of sense in that is that, and again, it's probably something that is just apparent to a lot of people, but the more clients that I work with, or the more clients that a consultant works with, the more challenges you discover and the more solutions you discover to those challenges. And so the way somebody deals with it might, they might do A where somebody else does B, and they both work. And now you have A and B solutions to take to the new client. So it's almost like the more clients that I work with, the faster I build that expertise, and I'm able to share that across the board. And so that's one of the things that I think really, when you do hire a coach, you're not just hiring their expertise, but you're hiring everything that they're learning through working with each one of their clients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. All right. So what am I working on now? You asked. Well, let's see. I've been diving deep into the e-commerce world. I'm just super fascinated with e-commerce, and it's a lot more sexy than property management, believe it or not. But I just am fascinated. And I'm not talking about like Amazon arbitrage or something like that, but e-commerce has been fascinating. Working on developing with Kristen's company, which is Bind, is a financial trust accounting online course product. I think our industry sadly does not take trust accounting seriously, or at least serious enough. So often we think, oh, we're three-way tied out, and we're not. There's money, like people are using their operation funds. I mean, their trust funds for operating finances. Like big no. That's no bueno. So don't do that.
They'll pay it back at some point, right? So it's not a problem.
Sure. It's like sticking your hand in the, your kids' penny jar or whatever, their bank account. That's not cool. But so helping develop that should be launching here, hopefully within the next month. We'll have a nice, robust course to take someone from A to Z there, and really get their trust accounts balanced. And I don't know about you. We ran one of our core values when I first started Independence Capital was 100% compliant 100% of the time. This is such a regulated business. And, we're regulated on how we deal with fair housing and whatever else, but we're also regulated in the financial sense. Like we're a fiduciary of somebody else's money. So I'm super excited about the course that Kristen's producing there. I'm the back end tech guy, if you will, on setting up the course, creating an app and a platform for someone in a community to really dive deep into correcting or just learning about trust accounting, the proper methods there. So that's something exciting. Do some consulting with people looking to buy investment properties. Like I said, I just love real estate investing. I've helped several PMC or property management company owners start to purchase the doors that they already have under management. When that client comes to you and says, look, I hate owning a rental property, you should be the first one that says, well, I love it. So let me see if we can make a deal here. And so often you could get creative and favorable terms to purchase that door and not have to fork any money out. A lot of times, people worry about, I don't have the down payment for that. Well, there's so many ways to be creative on purchasing rental properties that I don't think people think about, and they're really fun to deal with. That was one thing I loved about Homevault. We had a sub company of Homevault Ventures, and I think you loved it less than I did, but but I loved Homevault Ventures and just the opportunity to purchase rental properties from our clients, or just to grow that nest egg is fun for me. So I'm doing that as well.
I think I've known you for a while now, and one of the things that I get excited about when we're talking, obviously I see you have a passion for helicopters, and maybe at some point we can share how far that passion goes. But the other thing that I really enjoy watching you talk about is the real estate investing, because you have created this niche for yourself where you're kind of the guy when it comes to figuring out how to work through a portfolio and get owners to approach you to say they want to sell their property. So I know you had said, if somebody raises their hand and says, hey, I don't want to manage this property anymore, or I don't want to own this property anymore, I hate being an investment property owner for whatever reason, that you were really good about figuring out favorable terms. But one of the things that I hope we dive deeper into is that you didn't just leave that to chance, that you have a proven system that you can walk people through that will actually encourage that type of behavior, to where when and if somebody decides that they're ready to step out, that you are their first option and their first choice. If you work that right, there is no second option or second choice, because you've already wrapped up the deal. It's not like a snake in the grass kind of thing. It's you've worked out something that works great for both of you. And so I hope that we get to spend some time talking about that, because while I didn't love Homevault Ventures, it's not because I didn't love the idea. It's because I wasn't crazy about the way the partnership wound up and how we just some of the partnership and some of the ways that we dealt with the entity, but not the concept. The concept is fantastic and I love it.
Yeah, we'll definitely that sounds like 2 future podcast topics right there, right? We'll have to dive deep into the investment standpoint and how to make it a system. So you are the first person they'll call. And then number 2 is like how to maybe like avoid that partnership conflict. I mean, we could talk all day about those things. So happy to dive into it. Yeah, but that's basically what I've been up to. And just, life is grand, way better than I deserve. So
nice.
So those are future podcast episodes. I want to ask you, like, what is the one thing you miss about running a property management company? And the one thing, if you could figure out one thing that you do not miss about running a property management company.
Yeah. So kind of hitting me on the spot here. I think one of the things that I miss about running a property management company was I was able to create a company, and this was prior to us doing our merger, but I ran a company where I, as the owner of the company, worked 5 to 10 hours a week. And that's one of the reasons why you and I, that it was so attractive when we started talking about doing something bigger and better, was I had gotten the company to the point where it was providing me with a decent lifestyle at a very minimal amount of effort. And I sort of got bored. I was looking for what's the next biggest thing. The recurring revenue was one of the things that I really enjoyed once I got the company on a system. But to go maybe a little bit deeper than that, on the time when I worked on the 5 or 10 hours, I was either working on the business or I was working on things that were really complicated issues that, in a high-rise building, you might have a flood on the 22nd floor and it goes down 3 floors. But then because it's concrete, it actually water will follow to the point of least resistance. So it might come down this stack for 3 properties, 3 units, then go across and come down another stack, and trying to figure that out and manage that, all the owner communication. When it's an HOA, you don't manage the other units, but yet you got to figure out how to work an owner through that. Really being a trusted advisor and coming out with a solution on the other end where an owner just puts their trust in you and you provide, you come through. I just really enjoy that. I really felt like there are very few people in the industry that could operate at that level. Now, whether it's true or not, I don't know, but that's how I felt, was like they were putting their trust in me, and there were very few people that could deliver a solution, and I was able to do that. And so that's one of the things that I really missed.
All right, what don't you miss?
All right, so what I don't miss is government interference
in all of our lives.
Yeah, I think that's the key. In Colorado, the last 4 or 5 years, it has just become nuts how much the government knows about.
You guys are like mini California, man.
I wouldn't even say mini. I mean, they're calling it Colorado.
California on steroids or what?
Yeah, it's gotten pretty bad out here, but it is what it is. You have to find the opportunity. Sometimes those regulations actually make it more necessary for a landlord to have a property manager. So it's not that, you need to stick your head in the sand and just be grumpy over the regulations. But 5 years ago in Colorado was a much better time for landlords and property managers as far as being able to provide a service and run their own business the way that they want to run it. Unfortunately, I think there were a handful of cases where it makes the news, and then the legislators hear about that. And if you think about it, if you think about why property management companies and landlords are on the losing end of any legislation that's going to be coming out, it's because the landlords don't live in the district where the votes come from, right. Typically, right? The tenants live there, and the tenants are the ones that the politicians need the votes from. And so they're going to do what is in what they believe the best interest of the tenant, because that's who they need to make happy. They don't care that there's an investor from out of state that is actually providing housing and a place for that tenant to live. They just care that the tenant gets, taken care of. And so they listen to that voice, even if it's only a couple of bad stories in the industry. Those are the stories they're going to listen to. So
yeah,
long-winded answer, but that's the thing I don't miss.
Yeah, regulations, it's tough to navigate. It's funny, like you look at Australia and it's super regulated. Like tenants, I love Darren Hunter used to always say, tenants are like a protected species.
Yeah,
that's a really good way to look at it. I know like Oregon, Washington, California, Colorado, it's getting that way, but it does provide a platform for professionals to do the professional job.
Yeah.
So I guess, it's a catch-22. I'm certainly a deregulation type of guy, but it does provide people to pick up that phone and say, I can't navigate this myself. I need to hire a pro. So let's get a professional in here, so interesting.
All right. So let's bounce that same question back to you. What's one thing you miss and one thing you don't?
What I miss the most, I'd love, you and I share this. We're both visionaries, love the big ideas, love the futuristic thinking of property management. I don't know, one of the things that I launched way back in the day before anybody else I knew did it was like the protection programs. There was a few others out there doing it. I loved that kind of stuff, just being innovative, providing good solutions to better the experience for the resident and the client. I love that. I also miss just managing the team. I loved the team atmosphere, going into the office, interacting with my team, trying to elevate them as professionals as much as I could, which always just flooded over to me and helped me elevate, which was super fun. What I hated about property management, my staff used to tell me this, Shawn, you're not allowed to talk to tenants. I hated talking to tenants because I have this really soft spot in my heart. And I know what the lease says. I know what the regs say, but I was too nice, if you will, and I know that the client hires us to be that enforcer a lot of times, we got to draw the line. And the tenant or my staff would be like, Shawn, are you kidding me? You just waived that late fee. We already told that guy we weren't going to waive the late fee. And so I was quickly removed from those duties, which was fine by me because I didn't enjoy it anyway. So that was just who I am as a person. For instance, I have an Airbnb right now, and Airbnb has these pretty strict cancellation policies on longer term stays. So like any 30-day or more, there's like no cancellations, no adjustments, blah, blah, blah. Well, we have a gal in there. She's a traveling nurse. And she said, or something's going on with my workplace. It's not a good environment for me right now. I need to end my stay early. And can you give me a refund for the 11 days? And I'll be, yeah, do it. You know what I mean? When I could have just, no, the policy is, X, but I just.
So we'll talk about this more in the future. But that is actually one of the reasons why our big merger experienced some challenges, because you and I are very similar in that way, in that there's what the lease says, there's the law, and obviously you need to do right by your landlord, but there's also a human component to it. And for me, even if it cost me money, I one of my goals is to live at peace, just to be at peace, right? And so sometimes arguing over a $67 invoice of, who should cover that, like, you know what, this conversation right here of us talking about this $67 does not add value to my life. As a matter of fact, writing a check for $67 to make this go away provides more value than me being right. Now, there are others in our industry who don't agree with that. And there are others in our industry who we became partners with that wouldn't agree with that. And so it's hard to run a company when you don't have a shared vision. But I'm with you. Like, there's the legal thing to do, and then there's the human thing to do. And if the human thing to do is going to be better for you in life, do that.
Yeah. That's a great, that'll be a good podcast topic. I'm sure we'll dive deep into as well. So, well, let's call this a wrap, Tony. That was really cool. That's really fun. It's good to hear your story in greater detail. But in our next episode, let's dive a little bit deeper about Homevault, mergers, acquisitions, the dynamics there, and then maybe even into our Pure being acquired by Pure or VC-backed company. And, Pure's a big name in the industry. So it'll be interesting to dive a little deeper into that too.
So you notice, so we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about some other things in future episodes, things like teams. You mentioned being very passionate about building your team. That's one of the things that I really have brought into our marketing is, we help companies build championship teams so that they, as the property management entrepreneur, can step off the field and manage their team from the sidelines. So I'm super into teams and culture and creating that vision and creating a team that can know the rules to win, but also the plays to execute. And so we'll dive deep into sharing our experiences in creating those types of environments. We're going to talk about legislation. You mentioned Pure right there at the very end. I'm sure that it won't go unnoticed that as we talked about what we were doing now in the very beginning of this conversation, neither one of us said that we were still with Pure. So I'm sure.
Ooh, we should talk about that. That'll be fun.
There's some details there about what happened, why we're not there, and whether or not that was the right thing to do, whether it was right for us to be acquired by Pure, and whether it was right for us to leave at that time.
Yeah, that'll be good. So season 1, episode 1. Well done, Tony.
All right. It's in the can.
All right, buddy.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next time to cut through the noise of what it really takes to be a successful entrepreneur.
If today's episode hit home, share it with a friend. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one.